Fine. So now the first thing so far what we were seeing is like, okay, there are some activities which you have to do. So now each activity depends on what is that it's going to help. So in that
Adams.
basis, the first thing what you need to understand is what is SCM. So on a simpler word, if you see, yeah, Rajesh.
Yeah, Adams. At times your voice is breaking up. I guess like you're going forward and backward from your speaker. I guess that's the reason it's breaking up.
Okay, I think it should be clear now. Let me know in
Yeah,
case
it's
you're
clear
not
now.
hearing.
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. Adams, go ahead, go ahead. Thank you.
Fine. So yeah, so now the first thing what you need to know is the discipline called SCM. So what is SCM and why do we need is what you need to understand. So the thing is SCM or software configuration management is a process wherein you try to track and control whatever you try to modify in the form of coding. Okay, so when I say you might be a developer or a QA or a DevOps engineer. You try to write something and try to store. So anything that you can write the code and maintain them is what software configuration management is going to do. Okay, getting that point? So whatever that you can write in text format and you can maintain, that is what software configuration management is going to do. So to ask this question now, as I said, you might be anyone who's writing some kind of code. So being a developer, you will write your products code. Being a QA engineer, you might be writing some automation script for testing, okay, or some test suite you will be writing. You might be a DevOps engineer wherein you have to write some kind of scripts for infrastructure management or automation, wherein it's not a program, but some kind of scripting you have to do. Now, each of them has to be maintained separately. Okay. Now, in the same perspective, are you the only one who will be going to write? No, because in a team, there might be several people who are working along with you and they will be working on the same product. So, if you're trying to modify something, you will be modifying on one of the functionality, wherein the other person will be modifying on other functionality. So, in that case, where will you maintain all the changes what you're doing, right? And the second thing is, now your teammate can be present in the same place or he might be present across the globe in a different country. Now, how will you communicate? Can you hear now? Okay. So how will you communicate between these users? So there should be some kind of method that you properly tell, right? Because what will happen is, say that you are writing some line of code and you are maintaining. Now, the same code has to be used by the other teammate of yours to do some other functionality. What if whatever code that you have written is not compatible with what he has written? Which means whatever code that you have written is not going to be used by the other person, and if that is not going to work, then it will be a bigger problem because nothing will work at the end. So there has to be a proper coordination and maintenance of all this code, and forget about all these things. You will be writing some code or you will be writing some scripting, whatever I say. So when I say code, it is not a program, it is something you try to write. Okay, now you will be writing to achieve some task for 3 4 days. Suddenly you realize that on the third day, on the second day, whatever you did, you have to reuse it. But if you have not taken a backup, then what will happen? You are going to lose all the data, right? Now all of now we have been just talking about only one developer or one user. Now if you take the same scenario on a bigger scale, you might be having 100 users, you might be having 1,000 users. How is that everything has to be maintained? So that is when the software configuration management comes into the picture, wherein you will be assisting the activities using this tool. Exactly. The other name for version control is software configuration management. Okay. So why you call it as version is because whatever changes that you do, we call it in terms of version. That is what we will call. I'll tell you later about the terminologies that you use. Okay, so in that case, what does SEM helps us is sorry, SEM is majorly going to help us in achieving few things, that is teamwork. So when I say teamwork, it will help you to ensure that whatever changes that people are doing, they do it as a team. That means, say that you do some change and you store it in the SEM tool. Now, as soon as a new person is trying to modify the same code in the same file, immediately he will understand that, or this SEM tool will let him know that, hey, look, whatever changes that you're doing is old. I see that this person has modified some new changes into it. I think that you have to take that changes and start working into it. Okay, so it is not going to tell you like what I am telling, but it will give you proper messages saying that your code is old, there is some new code that is present, you have to take that and do your activity. So like that, people can be easily coordinated using this tool, and you can set some proper policy on who should be writing, who should not be writing. Suppose if I don't want anyone not to put any code into the product, then we can stop and we can allow only some people to do it and not all the others. Like for example, if you want to do a release, okay, when you are doing a release, you don't want too many changes to be put into the product, so we will stop at that point of time to ensure that no one tries to put any new code. Because what will happen is, if you try to put new code and while you are trying to release, if something doesn't work, then you have to spend time in debugging and fixing it. So for that reason, we will be saying that, okay, let me stop the build for some time, or let me stop the code for some time until we release it. But that doesn't mean that you have to completely not allow anyone, because there might be one more customer who needs some changes to be done, and even he will ask that you have to do some coding for that. So in that perspective, you have to allow only certain people to work on some important task. So how will you do all this kind of activity? So all those things will be achievable through the concept of software configuration management. Okay, and then one of the regular thing what we need to do is, everyone can write code, but if something goes wrong, how will you find out who wrote the code, what is exactly breaking? So like I said, you might be writing some 2 lines, your teammate will write another 2 lines, there might be someone else across the globe, the same team, he might be writing some 10 lines. Now on a daily basis, there will be so many changes coming in here. Now how will you find out what caused the problem, or which line of the code is the defective one? So for that, again, using the SEM tool, you can clearly tell that this person did this changes in this file at this point of time. So like that, it can clearly tell you, because it is going to track each and every line. Even if you put one dot into it, it is going to track that. Okay, that is why SEM is being used across all these places. And finally, if you see, if you want some data for auditing, okay, suppose if you are working on some government related projects, or especially in US, you will be working on some federal related projects. Federal in the sense, in US, that refers to the government. Okay, so suddenly they will come up and say that, are you underlying or are you following some policies which we have to use it? Or I will say that if I have to take some product from you, you have to follow some ISO standards. Okay, there are some things like will happen. So in that case, how will the company say that our users have followed the ISO standards, our coding is like this, our environment is like this? So in order to tell them, you need a place to get all the details. So configuration management or software configuration management can help you to get those details, because all those changes whatever that you're trying will be stored in some place. So at any point of time when you want to take a auditing, you can get the data and give it to them. Okay, so this will be the major use of SEM. Now if you see, in this case, this is just the concept. So now how is that exactly you are going to achieve all this thing is, for that there is lot of tools available in the market through which you will be trying to do the task. Okay, so in that case, what and all tools are available? So there are tools especially with respect to activities like open source, or we have tools called as licensed. which means you can purchase a license from a company wherein they will support you with all the problems whatever you're facing setting up the product, okay, or setting up the tool. Or you can go with something called as open source, wherein it is freely available in the market. And open source is something wherein it is maintained by a group of people, wherein they don't charge anything for that. It is just purely based on their interest. Okay, I'll just keep on writing the code and I'll form a product and I'll put into open source so that anyone can take it and they can do some modification on top of that. So currently, if you see, companies are going towards open source because it is freely available. And second thing is you can modify it as per your requirement. Okay, so in that cases, now what are the tools that is available in the market currently? If you see, there are tools for SCM like Subversion, Clearcase, Perforce, Git. Now, out of this, there are tools which each company wants to know and each company wants to use. Now, it is debatable question. See, all the tools, especially from the SCM side, if you say, it is not that this tool is better than the other tool, that tool is better than the other tool. Now, it depends on the company's requirement. Now, if my company is more towards consulting and if my company is more towards service oriented, then I don't want to spend time in setting up everything. Okay, so in that case, because I want to immediately support some customer, I want to do a release or do a production within some 2 to 3 weeks. So in that case, I cannot spend time in setting up my environment for 1 week and in another 1 week I'll be writing code and then giving, because time is very short. So in that case, I want things to be readily available. So for that, what I'll do, I will go with some license tool wherein immediately within half a day they'll come and set the tool environment, and if there is any problem, immediately we can touch base with them, get the things done. And now the same thing, if you go into product company, they will say, I have my time. I have 6 months to release my product. There is nothing urgent. And I don't want to spend too much of time because I'm already paying an engineer. So they will ask you to go with open source tools, work on them. You try to modify the, bring it to your environment and fix things. Okay. That is how we will be working on tools specific to that. So in that way, currently, if you see, especially for all these activities from the DevOps engineering side, okay, and the build engineering side, if you see, we use one tool called Git, which is popularly used. It is because there are certain advantages when compared to all the other tools, because we are not going to work as a developer. Because if you see, as a developer in a team, you will be having 30, 40, hundreds of developers, but how many DevOps engineers will be there? If you see, in that case, there will be hardly one or two. So in that case, the amount of work what you're going to do is not so huge like what developers are going to do. So in that case, we are not required to work on some tool like Subversion or Clearcase or Perforce, which can achieve to do the same thing. But if you have to do it, it is going to be very huge product. So just like if you have tried installing Oracle, it is a huge product, you know. In order to do that, it will take more than 2-3 hours for you to install and work. So rather than that, you can install some lightweight products which can help you to achieve the same. So in the same concept, Git is very lightweight and you can easily share the code between different users, not like that tool like Subversion or Perforce. So that is the reason why Git has been quite popular. But this is just the normal terms what I'm saying. But technically, if you want to see, we will see in deep specifically from the SCM tool. Okay, fine. Let me. Okay, so with that basis of what is SCM, now let us try to understand more about a tool called Git and why it is used and how it is used for SCM. But before that, did you get what is SCM? What do we really do in SCM? Nagesh, Prithvi, or Rajesh?
Yeah, Adams. Hello.
Yeah, Prithvi.
This is Rajesh Adams.
Okay, sorry. I was just asking a question.
Yeah,
So at least you
as
got
of
to.
now, I'm working on.
Mhm.
Yeah, as of now, I'm working on Git, so I just know some basic, procedural steps of Git, mm, like how a developer pushes a code into the GitHub and then how it gets deployed. I know the basic knowledge of it since I'm working on it.
No problem. I'll still go through some fundamentals which you don't know. Okay, so I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
just
sure.
trying to give an understanding of Git. Now, before even going into this, so at least I just want to know, did you guys first get to know what is SEM? Because without knowing it, there is no point in learning Git. Okay, that's the reason I'm asking. Prudvi, did you
Yeah,
get that?
yeah, I got it. I got it.
Okay, now before jumping into the Git, I would like to give a few terminologies which will be used in the SEM tool. So that is what is you need to understand. Because going forward, when you are working on a tool, especially on SEM side, they will be using some common terms. So you should be knowing what is that. Okay, so for that, let's try to understand something. So first thing is we call repositories. Then you have client server, then you have workspace, and then you have branch, and you have check-in, and you have version, and you have tag. Okay, so these are some normal terminologies what people would be using when you are working on SEM. So you will be hearing these terms a lot when you're working on SEM. Okay, so now first understand what are these. Okay, so what is repositories? Now, I was telling you that for a product or some kind of activity that you want to do, you have to write some files and store it. So you might not be writing the program completely, or you might be writing some kind of automation script which is specifically needed. Now, if you say typically, you have to create a product which is going to be, so even if you're writing some automation script, can you see the screen now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not still sharing that. I'll share that. I'm just trying here.
No,
So,
no, no, not. But I'm getting the upstream, right?
okay. So, repositories is nothing but a directory where you exactly store everything. Okay. So now in that case, for each product, you will be having a separate repository. Okay. So it will be more convenient if I tell from the developer's perspective so that you can understand it to the DevOps concept of how do you store. So when you take as a developer, he might be writing different codes for different products. So repository is nothing but a directory or a container where you store all the files related to one particular product. So when you say it may not be a program, even if we might take from the QA or DevOps engineer, you have to write some scripts for a particular product. The same thing cannot be used for different cases. So in that case, you have to group them. So that grouping is nothing but repositories. So in simple words, repositories are nothing but a container or a directory where you store all the files related to one product. Okay. Fine. Now, in that case, where exactly you will be storing these containers or directories? So that will be stored in a place called server. So server is a place where you store all the repositories wherein all the metadata information. So when I say metadata, it is how many products are there, what and all changes are being done, who are the users who are working onto it, who is trying to access, like that all the information would be present in the server. Okay, fine. Now the next thing is you have server and you have some directories inside it. Now you as a user, how is that you are going to work on that? Because you are not interested to work on all the products. First thing is you are interested to work on one product, and second thing is, are you interested to work on all the files in the product? Maybe or may not be. So in that case, you need to work on only those which is of your interest. So in that case, we create something called as workspace. So workspace is a directory or a place in your current server on which you are working. That means in your laptop or in your desktop you will be working, right? So workspace is the directory where you can actually see the files physically and do all the modifications. Okay, now when I say that you want to work on a product X, whatever files that you need for that product X will be present in this workspace. So how will you create this workspace? So you need to have some interaction between the server. You have to tell to the server that, look, I need this product, this directory for which I have to work on some files.
Can be edited any file in the repositories.
No, that is what I'm trying to say. Repositories is only to store.
And workspace we can modify.
Exactly. Workspace is the place where you want to exactly modify. You cannot try to do everything on the server directly, right? For that same thing, in your laptop or in your server where you are working, you need to install a client which will help you to create a workspace, so that if you go inside this workspace, you will be pointing only to that product in the repository. Okay, not everything. For example, take this Facebook. So how do you access Facebook? You will be accessing Facebook from your laptop or from your mobile, where you need some place to work, right? So that is what you call those icons or apps, whatever you use is nothing but your workspace. So in that, are you going to log into the Facebook server and try to see their database, everything? No, you will log in only to what is required for you, that is your home page. In the same case, in the workspace, you will be pointing only to what is required, which means you will be pointing only to that repository which is related to a product and see only the files which is related to it and not everything. Okay, for that purpose client is used, wherein client acts as a intermediate or as an interface between workspace and server. So in the workspace, you tell what files that you need to work. So client will try to fetch that file specifically from the server and put into your workspace. Okay. Okay. Now, fine. So now, like this, there might be many people having many workspaces and working onto it. Okay. Now, let me make it a little more in a different way. Now, I said you will be having repositories, right? When you say repositories, it is nothing but a directory. So you might be having a product X, then you might be having a product Y. So it is different directory, it is different directory. Okay, now you as a user, if you see, if you want to work on both of these products, then you will create one workspace called workspace X. Now what is this will be pointing? This will be pointing to the content of this product X. Similarly, you can have a workspace called workspace Y, which will be pointing to the content of product Y. Okay, so like this, each user can work on a separate product at any given point of time. So when you take the scenario, now what happens is that for the same product, you have to do some different changes, which means, okay, let me put it in this way. Now I'll take the same mobile example. Now you have a mobile. Okay, you are trying to support Android and you are also trying to support the Microsoft version, wherein the code base for both of them is the same. Now how will you try to do? So that means that, do you have to have one more product like that? No, the product is the same, but you have to do different features in the same product. So in that case, what you will do is, it is the same file which have to work in both the ways. So for that, we use some concept called branching. Okay, so what is branching is? Branching is nothing but a same copy of your product in the same files, wherein you can do parallel development. Okay, to put it in a simpler way. So the first thing what you will be having is, this is your repository. Okay, so what is repository? I'll put it simply repo. Repo is the directory where you'll be storing everything, right? Inside this, what did I tell you? I told you you will be having some files like this 1.java or 1.c, whatever files you have, or you can have a shell script or Perl script for automation. Okay, now suppose, as I said, you have these files. Now, until now, you were supporting only Android. Suppose if you want to support some Windows based products also, then you need to have a same copy wherein if you want you can do some changes with respect to Windows. At the same time you have to do the changes for Android, whatever it is. But how you do exactly is in the repository the changes are not stored directly. So further we have something called as branches, wherein in the branches you will be doing all this code. So by default, when you try to put one file in the repository, it is not directly in the repository, but it is inside something called as branch. Okay, so how you store the file exactly in the repository? First, you have the server. In the server, for each product, you have one repository. In the repository, you will be storing all the files and all the changes what you do correspondingly in a branch. Okay, so you can take branch as a view. So it's like a window to point to a particular changes. So wherein now this branch can be used for Android purpose. And suppose if you want to create some changes for the same set of files for Windows, what you can simply do is you can simply have a copy of this and allow the people to work on those changes, wherein if you see this will be used for what purpose? It will be used for Windows, wherein this is another branch. Okay, so like this, on a given repository you can have many branches which again all going to relate the same products files, but the functionality of this will be different, the functionality of this will be different. So now if you want, you can work on this branch or you can work on this branch, wherein all the changes what you're doing is going to correspond to one product, and that is one repository. Okay, so try to be clear here. So a repository can have multiple branches, and next, whatever files that you put inside this branch is known only to this branch and it doesn't know about this branch, which means now in this, suppose if I add 2.java, 3.java, then only this branch knows about it. All the changes that you do here is only known to this branch and it is not known to this branch. Okay, that is the advantage in SEM, wherein you can do all those changes because 2.java, 3.java is required for this product only for this functionality and it is not needed for others.
Yes. Actually, if my company is working with so many products, so here is scenario is that one project is there and another features are there. So branches are capable. But any multiple projects can be happened with the Git and you can select similar project
Yeah,
for.
each, that is what I'm saying. Each product will have a separate repository.
Okay.
So like this, there could be many products. I'm just focusing on one. So like this, if you take your repository, the whole thing will be, this whole thing will go inside a server. Okay, so a server will have many things like this. Let me shrink it and show you. Sorry, it is too small. So now, if you see, this is one repository what I did, right? Actually, I made it very big. Let me put you one more diagram and show you. So now if you see, so now this is the server. Okay, so inside the server you will be having repositories. So there will be one repository here, there will be one repository here. Now what is this repository? It is nothing but the product. For each product there will be one specific repositories. Okay, now All these things are repo. And inside each repo, what you will be having? You will be having something called as branches. Okay, and in this branch, whatever files that you try to do will be stored. Okay, you're getting it? What about others? Did you get that? So be clear, there will be separate repositories for each product, and each repository you will be having branches on which you are changing. So it is mandatory that whenever you create something called repository, there will be a branch called default branch coming in it. So it is not that when you create a new repository, you will be directly storing. So anything that you store in the repository is only on a branch, wherein if you don't create a new branch, there will be one default branch which is available on which you will be doing all the changes. Okay, is that clear? Please stop me if you have any doubts. Okay, now, so that is workspace and that is branch. Okay, now in the branch you will be having the code that you have written. Now on the other side, if you see, you will be having workspace which will be pointing to a particular branch. So now if you see in the workspace, you say that I want to work on this file called 1.java. So how will you be working? So in the workspace you will be actually pointing to this branch on a particular repository. Okay, so now when you are interested to work on a particular product, then what you have to do is in the workspace you have to configure it in such a way that for a particular repository, what is the exact branch that you want to work will be pointing here. So in this workspace X, you will be pointing to some branch on this repository for which you will be working. So if you have not created any branch, then you will be working on the default branch. Okay, fine. Now what will happen? The developer or the user, he will create the workspace and then he will be doing all the changes. So when he is doing the changes, where he'll be doing, he will be actually trying to do the
I had a
changes.
small doubt here.
Yes.
Okay, the thing is like from your iteration, like you said, like each repository or like each say like product X has like workspace X. Now you're saying like each branch will be having their own corresponding workspace, or like it's gonna point out to the workspace of the product X wherein the branches are present.
Okay. Now, so at least, okay, before going to the workspace, did you guys get this concept? Okay, now
Yeah, I
how
got the concept.
how in the workspace, now let me go back. So now when I say in the workspace, you are interested to work on some file. You are interested to work on this file called 1.java. Okay, now when you want to work on this 1.java, are you interested to work on the complete content of the repository, or you want to work only on this set of files? You are interested to work only on this set of files, right? So that means, where is this set of files exactly stored? It is stored in the branch. So that means I am not interested to see the complete content of the repository, wherein I want to point only to a branch, so that whenever you are working in the workspace, it will be pointing to a branch, where this branch will be pointing to the repository. Did you get that?
And workspace would be same for yeah, the workspace would be same for the branch as well as the product of that branch.
Exactly. Now it is just, see, workspace is your directory, you create it. Suppose you had this branch. Suppose if you create one more branch, what you can do is you can simply use the same workspace. You change the branch from Android to a new one. Suppose if you want to change to Android, you can change. If not, if you want to change to Windows, you can Windows. So that it is nothing but a directory in your laptop which will be accessing the files in this branch. So like that, you can switch between the branches whatever you want to work, wherein
Say like, let me put it in a simple way.
hmm,
Like say Rajesh is like a product. So
hmm,
Rajesh has like so many branches. Say Rajesh has like a branch 11. So the workspace is gonna be Rajesh. If I want to say see like branch 11 in Rajesh, so first the workspace will be remaining as Rajesh, but you will be pointing to the branch 11 of Rajesh, right?
exactly.
Okay, thank you.
I'll put it in much more.
So
Yeah, tell me.
yeah, I thought like each branch will be having its own corresponding workspace rather than having the workspace of product
No, no,
X.
no. No, see, that's what I'm trying to say. Workspace is nothing but a directory through which you will be working.
I
Okay.
got your point, Adam. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So when you want to use, you can use. So now each user, how will he access? That is what I was trying to say. Now you as a user, if you want to work on Java, now the very basic thing first you need to do is you need to have your own place to see the files physically. So how will you see the file physically? So that place is called workspace. Workspace is nothing but a directory in which you will be trying to access these files and do some changes. That is the concept. Now internally, if you see, what exactly are you trying to modify that? Now the first thing, it depends on what is the repository, and in that repository there are multiple branches that are available. So on that branch, which branch are you interested to work? So in that way you will be setting up or configuring your workspace which will be pointing to a particular branch. Okay, and please remember this much: whatever changes that you do in one branch is known only to that branch, and from a bigger picture, whatever that you do in one repository is known only to that repository. Other repositories doesn't know. Okay, fine. Now in the workspace you will be having this file, whatever that you can see physically. You can touch it, you can modify it, you can try to store some changes. So now at the end of the day you have to store the changes someplace, right? It is just your normal laptop or directory that you're storing. Now you have to permanently store it someplace. That is, you have to permanently store it back into the repository or in the server. So in order to do that, we use a concept called check-in. It is nothing but a terminology where the SCM tool will take the changes whatever you have done in your workspace or in your directory and put it back to the corresponding repository and the corresponding branch in the server. So that step is called as check-in, wherein check-in is nothing but putting back the changes what you have done from your local place to the server or to the repository.
You can comment out some.
Exactly. I'll come to that concept because there are different
Got it.
naming that you use. So check-in is nothing but putting back the changes or storing the changes permanently. But now, every time when you try to do this check-in, you might be doing a check-in, your teammate might be doing a check-in, there might be some other person, they might be doing a check-in. Now, every person will be trying to do a check-in, wherein what is check-in? You are trying to put back some changes, what you have done, which could be some addition of lines, deletion of lines, or even creating new files itself. So in that case, how can a SEM tool like Git or any other tool can exactly try to identify? So that is what it uses internally called version, wherein version is nothing but a reference through which it can identify what exactly you have checked in. So now maybe Rajesh or Anup is trying to do some changes. Now if Anup is trying to do some 2 lines of changes, you will be tracking it, wherein Rajesh is trying to change another 2 lines. So there will be a version which is nothing but some reference through which you can easily say that Anup submitted these 2 changes, Rajesh submitted these 2 changes. Okay, so that is what version is going to be, wherein version is nothing but a ID or an identification for the changes what you have submitted. Okay, and tag, actually I'll tell you more about tag when I go inside the Git classes deeply. So for now, are you understanding this? Wherein now this is the common terminologies what you will be seeing day in and day out with any SEM tool, where there might be little difference in the name, because some tools call it repository or they call it as depot. Okay, one and the same. In some places here you might be calling it as a workspace, or you might call it as working directory. It is all the same, or you can also call it as working tree. Everything is the same. Now again, some tool call them as branches, some tool call them as trunk. Okay, now some tool call it as code line. So everything is the same. So why I'm using a very common term is you can understand that. So no matter if you go to some other place, they might be using some other term, it is the same. Now in the same concept, you might call it as check-in, or you might call it as commit. Everything refers to the same concept wherein you are putting back the changes. And in the same thing, you might call it as a version, or you might call it as a version ID. And if you're referring to the check-in as commit, then here you will call it as commit ID. Okay, so all these things going to be the same reference. All right, so with this concept, what we'll do is we will go little deep into the subject. Fine, but is that clear with everyone? What is the basic terminologies?
Yeah.
Okay, so